We just bought the cheapest FRS in the nation.
I gotta say, guys, it's a little edgy.
If you haven't seen the video of us documenting bringing this thing home,
which included it breaking down, today we're gonna do something a little bit different. We're gonna toss this thing up on a lift, do a proper inspection, and see just exactly what do you get for a sub $10,000 FRS.
this is everything wrong with our cheap FRS. Welcome to Ideal.
Before we could dive in and really inspect this car, we first had to get the thing running. Step one was to check and make sure Brad didn't just run it out of gas.
Crap, I gotta go wash my hands.
And then move on to scanning for codes.
It just locked up.
There were faults stored for cam-crank correlation as well as the crank sensor itself, which can mean one of two things.
Either A, there's a problem with the crank sensor or its wiring, or B, the engine has suffered pretty catastrophic damage and we're gonna have to dig a bit deeper.
What the hell?
Okay, go ahead and crank it.
Luckily, the signal from the crank sensor was, well, it didn't have one. And when cranking, the engine sounds healthy.
See, when an engine jumps time or breaks a connecting rod or has some sort of catastrophic valve train failure, you can hear it by the sound the engine makes when you crank it. You can hear the pistons fighting against the compression they're making. You hear how this engine makes a really kind of even rhythmic sound? If it was hurt really bad, it'd sound something more like this.
Dude, is that on the ground?
With the new crank position sensor installed and Brad's posterior firmly clenched, it was time to find out if our FRS could be brought back to life.
It's not gonna blow up, is it? I'm so nervous.
Well, come on, man, it's not gonna start itself.
All right. Dude, the wheels are spinning. The wheels are actually spinning. That's nuts. Does that mean it has some sort of differential?
Doesn't mean anything.
Oh.
All right, so it's running, but before we properly inspect this thing, I want to get it out on the road and see how it drives.
Dude, it runs.
Yeah, it seems to run pretty good, but it's kind of loud. It's a little throaty.
Nah, man, that's just uncontained horsepower. What do you think of this thing?
Well, right off the bat, I can tell the steering wheel's way off center. So I don't know if that was previous collision or what's going on with that. Maybe it just needs an alignment. It's making a pretty concerning clunk from the front end. We'll have to dive in and see what's going on there. Could be a blown strut or a ball joint or maybe a sway bar bushing. We'll have to take a closer look. Also, the check engine light's on, but I'm sure that's just because we forgot to clear those crank sensor faults. And then there's the exhaust, which I don't know if you guys can hear this. It's a bit louder than one should be, mostly because it appears to be missing its rear muffler. Overall though, it runs really good. The shifter is amazing. The clutch feels great, and guess what?
What?
Brakes work.
Ow.
The road test taken care of, it was time to put this thing in the air and check things over.
Now guys, Brad kind of already gave you the general overview of the condition of this car in the last video when we bought it. But there's a few key things I wanted to just touch on here, because that's what you do with the normal inspection. Things like this trim here, that's not looking too hot. Come along here all the way to the front bumper. This is, well, it's seen better days. The hood, you know, some of these marks that he already pointed out, unfortunately, it does seem that those are below paint, so this is probably gonna need a respray. In fact, big parts of the car might need a respray, because when you look at the doors, they might have just been hit with shopping carts, sort of like Brad said, but to me, it looks like maybe on both sides, something a little more major happened. We won't know until we look a little bit closer. Things like this mirror indicate to me that this car's probably had some paint. I don't think that finish is the way these came from the factory, but I'm not an expert on the FRS yet, so don't quote me. Coming around the back here, you can see all four wheels have curb damage. That's pretty common on a car with this mileage, and to be honest with you, none of them are that bad, but it is something we have to contend with. Good news though is the tires look pretty good. Now, clearly something is missing. All of these cars came with double exhaust, and ours, well, it's been downgraded to a little single. Now, as far as the interior, it's seen better days. There's some pretty bad wear on the bolster there. There's the little spot right here that Brad thought maybe was from a cigarette. I think it's actually just one of these little buttons got ripped out. There's wear and tear on the shift knob and the parking brake handle. Steering wheel looks good though. Overall, it's a 6 out of 10. But don't worry, you're gonna wanna stick around because in an upcoming video, we're gonna show you how to improve this on the cheap. And I hate to ask, but whether you're new here to Ideal or you've been watching us for a long time, could you please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel? It really helps us out and it means a lot to us. Now, without wasting any more of your time, let's toss this thing on a lift and see what Brad actually bought us.
We start with a thorough inspection of the suspension, checking for any damage or play in the control arms, ball joints, steering system, and wheel bearings.
So this right here might actually be our clunk. That bushing is pretty wasted.
Then check the wheels for any obvious cracks or bends and take a peek at the brake pads, rotors, and hoses.
These rear brakes are pretty worn. This exhaust though, looks like someone hacked off the stock unit and welded on the old cherry bomb, which hasn't been there.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
We finish things up by checking for leaks, testing the brake fluid, and inspecting some filters.
Flavor adventure. Oh, buddy. Okay, overall, it's actually a pretty sorted little car. It seems like someone took pretty good care of this thing.
It didn't come with a single service record, but the Carfax did show it was regularly maintained at a Toyota dealership. Now, thankfully, we're gonna be able to get parts at wholesale pricing. And since this car that we're planning on building into a Slayer on this channel, it's gonna just cost us labor, and that's basically just our time.
Yeah, but we thought it would be fun to price this out to give you guys an idea of what you might pay if you had to take this to a mechanic and just pay to get it done.
After tens of minutes of intense office work,
Yeah, you're gonna wanna come in here, man. You ready?
No.
First, there's the diagnostics of the no start condition. That's gonna cost standard 1 hour diagnosis of $139, parts are $142.86, and then there's the additional hours labor to replace the part itself and clear the faults, which we still haven't done, so I owe you that. That's $420.86 for that. And I didn't charge you anything to come pick you up off the side of the road, so. Then, because this car had the valve spring recall done, the smart choice would be to remove that oil pan and check for any excess sealant. That was a big problem with these. You've got to pull the exhaust to do that. You've obviously got to drop the oils, so it's gonna get an oil change at the same time. You're looking at $686.42 to go ahead and take care of that. Then there's some general maintenance that needs to be done since we don't have service history or really any records. In my opinion, it's best just to assume things like the spark plugs and transmission fluid and rear diff fluid have never been touched. So we'll go ahead and take care of all that so we know for sure the car is at least at a good starting point. All in, you're looking at $437.57 for parts and an additional $700 or so for labor to take care of those plugs and all the maintenance. Spark plugs and the labor on those are really killing you there. They're, oh my God. List price is like $100 a piece per plug. Okay, next up is rear brakes. Brakes are brakes. You need pads, rotors, and adjustment of the parking brake, which leads us to the rear muffler, sway bar bushings, and the alignment. For that muffler, you've got options. There are used ones for around $200 on eBay, and depending on what you want to do, a decent aftermarket one is, you know, $450 to $650. So let's just guess $450 on that. Those sway bar bushings are no big deal. We should start there for the clunk. There's some other worn suspension stuff going on, but we'd start with the sway bar bushings. And lastly, the car needs an alignment, but given the age and wear on the—
You can stop there.
all in, the grand total came to just over $4,000. And that's without fixing any of the cosmetic issues on the car. Needless to say, Brad wasn't happy.
So, if you were gonna buy this car and you got this inspection report back, well, you'd probably be better off just buying a more expensive car in nicer condition. Given that we're gonna just be ripping this thing apart because we wanna show you how cars actually work, and then we're gonna build it into a supercar Slayer, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the ideal pick. You guys know what I think about this inspection sheet? It's like a love letter from an ex. Worthless. And you know how we fix this suspension? Well, with an aftermarket coilover unit. This muffler down here, a catback. And this off-center steering wheel, I don't really know the answer to that. Anyway, Ideal fam, if you enjoyed this video, well, you know what to do. Smash that like button like Trav smashes second gear. And if you enjoyed, well, look at these Ideal vids up here. I'm Brad the Financial Cowboy, that's Trav, this is Ideal, and promise me one thing, keep living the Ideal lifestyle.